So to the final game of Sunday, we'll start off with West Coast up against St Kilda. It was a bit of a danger game for the Saints, and it really was in the end, as the Eagles led from pretty much start to finish to run out winners in the end by 28 points. 108 to the Eagles, 80 to St Kilda. So the Eagles started pretty well. They kicked the opening 2 goals to set the tone in this game, but this one truly felt like a bottom 4 game to start off with. All of the opening 4 goals came from turnover, and it was set up for a very interesting contest. And the Eagles set it up to potentially have a great steal. At the opening break, they led by 14 points, and after taking a 3-goal lead early in the second term, it seemed that maybe there was an upset brewing. Now, the Saints did respond with their 3rd goal soon after, but the Eagles seemed like they were on a mission. They kicked 3 goals to 2 in the second term, and at halftime, they led by 19 points. And heading into the third quarter, they kicked the opening goal, but just couldn't put a big enough margin midway through the quarter, leading by 28 points, but it felt like it could have been a lot more. And the Saints kicked the next 2 goals to put a scare through the Eagles' camp in the latter parts of the third term, but the Eagles were able to find a late goal to lead by 28 points at the 3-quarter time break. It seemed like it was going to be enough. However, the Saints yet again started to come back. They kicked the first 2 goals of the final term to get under 20 points. But in the end, the Eagles did enough in the first 3 quarters to run away winners by 28 points. So well done to the West Coast Eagles. Finally, they get their first win of the season, and maybe they can record a few more going into the latter parts of the year. Andrew McWalter seems to finally be getting them into the game plan that he wanted at the start of the season. So well done to the Eagles. Finally, they get on the board. And St Kilda, you don't want to be the first team to lose to the winless side, and they walk home from WA in embarrassment. They really didn't deserve to win today. So it was a bit of a danger game for the Saints, and they really deserve to be on the back end of it to a pretty demoralising loss. But moving to the statistics of the game, on the West Coast Eagles and the multiple goal kickers, 2 goals to Allen, Reid, Waterman, Ryan and Williams for the Saints, 5 to Higgins, 2 to Wood and Wilson. On the disposals, 24 to Hoff, Marek 22, Duggan 21, 18 to Baker and 17 to Graham for the Saints. Jack Sinclair racked him up with the 38, 27 to McRae, Wanganeen Miller and Marshall, 24 to Wilkie. And finally, the AFL fantasy front, Beatty Hoff with the 108, 97 to Graham, 93 to Flynn, 84 Marek, 83 Duggan. And for St Kilda, Marshall 158, 135 to Sinclair, 105 to Steele, McRae 84 and Hill with the 83. But before we get to the votes, we have to mention the members' vote for round 9. How the members' vote works for you guys. For the review in 2025, a 3-2-1 voting system is awarded for every single game of the AFL season on the channel. And each round, players who receive 3 votes in the game have a chance to get a bonus vote. I will decide the 4 best players from the round, who will enter a poll exclusive for channel members to vote on, and the winner of that poll will receive the bonus vote for the round, the members' vote. And at the end of the 2025 AFL season, every vote counts. So this is your chance to have your say on the 3rd ever Boundary Riders medalist. So if that appeals to you, or if you just want to show some extra support on the channel, then make sure to click the channel membership link down below and join in the fun. But for now, let's get back into the video. So the members' vote for round 9 goes to Jesse Hogan after a massive 7-goal performance in his game. Now my brother has given the votes for all the Sunday games, and we'll start with the St Kilda West Coast game, of course. He has gone with 3 votes Rowan Marshall, 2 votes Brady Hoff, and the 1 vote to Jack Graham. So now we get to Brisbane up against Melbourne, and a lot of people would have expected the Lions to run away with this game and win this one pretty comfortably, but the Demons came out with a mission, and they caused a massive upset, winning by 11 points over the Lions, 99 to the D's, 88 to the Lions. So getting to the game itself, was a high-scoring start to this contest with 6 goals in the opening 20 minutes of the game, but the Lions broke away with 3 late goals to take a 17-point lead into the first break. And heading into the second term, the Lions got an early goal, and it seemed at that point the Lions were just going to have a pretty cruisy day. But the Demons were able to stay in touch. They kicked 2 of the next 3 goals, and at halftime were only down by 13 points. But again, the Lions started well in the third term. They kicked an early goal and were just threatening all day to take it away, but the Demons were able to stay in touch. They kicked 4 goals each in the third term, and at 3-quarter time, even though Melbourne were down by just 14 points, it just felt like they were about to make their charge. And in the final quarter, that's when it came. They kicked 4 goals in a row to take the first meaningful lead of the contest, leading by over 2 goals. And even though the Brisbane Lions threatened to take the game late, it was Melbourne in the end who won by 11 points. So this is one of the best performances that Melbourne have had probably in the last 2 or so years. This is a real team lifter, this one. I don't know how many players are going to be leaving the Demons at the end of the year, but I think Simon Goodwin could definitely hang his hat on this performance. In Brisbane, the last couple of weeks, I thought they were maybe going to start to charge towards their finals form, but they have really hit a roadblock. They've been winless in their past 2 games against teams they really should have won against, and right now, I think they will hit their form pretty soon, but They're sitting in a pretty precarious position right now. They've dropped off their top spot and they need to start finding some wins and they need to find their form pretty shortly. But moving to the statistics of this game, of course, on the multiple goal kickers for Brisbane, Gardner with 4, Logan Morris with 3. For the Demons, Melksham with 4, Pickett with 2. On the disposals for the Lions, Neil and Ashcroft with the 30, McCluggage with 28 along with Josh Dunkley, and 27 to Zorko. And for Melbourne, Petrarca 31, 25 to Langdon, 24 to Rivers, 23 to Oliver, and 22 to Bowie. And on the AFL fantasy front for the Lions, Zorko 109, Bailey 107, McCluggage 101 along with Lockie Neal, and 94 to Dunkley. And for Melbourne, Gawn with 118, Pickett 101, 93 to Langdon, 85 to Salem and Melksham. So let's get to the votes in this game. Now, my brother has also given the votes for this one. He has gone with 3 votes Cozzy Pickett, 2 votes Zach Bailey, and the 1 vote to Max Gawn. So to the first game on Sunday, it was the Tigers up against North Melbourne, the cellar-dweller clash, but Richmond have been able to keep in some close matches over the last few weeks, but North Melbourne finally break their drought at the MCG and finally break their drought of losing games throughout 2025 to win their second game of the season by 4 points. North Melbourne 78-74 to the Tigers. Now getting to the game itself, it was a great start for the Kangas. They kicked 5 of the first 6 goals to put a handy break early in the game. Now the game sat at stoppage for the majority of the contest and it worked in the Kangas' favour early, but the Tigers seemed to steady up heading into the first break as North Melbourne led by only 23 points. And with the Tigers keeping in touch late in the opening term, they seemed to spring to life early in the second. The Tigers kicked 4 in a row to draw level, and with only a minute left, they actually had the lead. However, a late Kangas goal saw the Roos lead by 5 points in the major break. And in the third term, it was lead changes galore. Richmond opened the scoring to take the lead back, but North Melbourne continues to fight the fight. They regained the lead, getting 2 in a row to give themselves the biggest lead since midway through the second term. However, 2 goals either way saw North Melbourne hold a 5-point advantage heading into the final break. And into the final quarter, the Tigers started well. They kicked the first goal of the quarter to cause yet another lead change, but again North Melbourne would respond. They kicked 2 goals in a row to take an 11-point advantage, and the Kangas seemed to lock it in their forward half, but they did fail to put the game beyond doubt, which gave the Tigers a chance. And finally, when they did respond, they got within a kick. The Tigers then started to dominate field position, but they failed on their side on the scoreboard. And in the end, the Tigers couldn't break in front in the final moments as the Roos would hang on for a 4-point win. So finally, North Melbourne have recorded their second win of the season. The last few weeks, they have threatened to win a game, but they haven't been able to put it through in the final moments. Got a draw last week against Brisbane, but well done to them to finally get a win. And I think they can use this as a springboard into their season. They've been crying out for a win, and I think once you do get a win, you can get a couple more in a row. So interesting to see how North Melbourne go for the rest of the season. If they can record 7 or 8 wins, jump up the ladder a little bit, I think that would be great signs for them. But on the Tigers, I mean, the fact that they have won already 3 games this season is beyond amazing for them. And the fact that they have been fighting in so many contests so far, I think you have to give so much credit to the Tigers. They've been playing so many young kids, but they've been able to really fight in most games so far this year. So well done to Richmond, but overall North Melbourne claim another win, and hopefully they can use this as a springboard into their season. But moving into the statistics of this one, on the multiple goal kickers for the Tigers, Campbell with 3, 2 to Lawler, Lynch and McIntosh, and for the Roos, Zerha with 4, 2 to Larkey and Darling. On the disposals for Richmond, Taranto with 30, 27 to Hopper, 25 to Banks, 22 to McAuliffe, and Ross with 21. And for the Roos, Davies Uniacke with the 27, Daniel with 25, Powell with 24, 22 to McKercher, and 20 to Sheasel. And finally on the AFL fantasy front, it was ruckman domination from both sides. First on Richmond, then Curtis 147, Ross with the 94, Taranto 93, 92 to Hopper, and 87 to Banks. And on the Kangas, Cherry with 152, McKercher 111, Power 99, 98 to Sheasel and Davies Uniacke. So we'll get to the votes in this game. My brother has given the votes for this one. He has gone 3 votes Tristan Cherry, 2 votes Seth Campbell, and the 1 vote to Toby Nankervis. So the sole game on Saturday night was the Dogs up against Essendon, the 31st instalment of the EJ Whitten Cup, and the Dogs absolutely wiped the floor with the Bombers from the outset and won by a whopping 91 points. 127 to the Dogs, 36 to the Bombers. Now there's one injury concern from this one, which was Artie Jones. He hurt his hamstring in the second term and unfortunately was subbed out soon after, so it was really the only dampener on a massive performance from the Dogs. The game was pretty much over at the first break. The Dogs absolutely dominated the game from the outset. They kicked 7 goals to zip in the opening term and led by 42 points at the first break and didn't look back. By halftime, the Dogs led by 59 points and the Dons looked out of sorts. They only had 1 goal to the major break. I know I'm glossing over a lot of this game, but it was absolute one-way traffic for the entire contest. It was one of the more comprehensive performances I've seen in more recent times. The Dogs in the end, like I said, ran out winners by 91 points. So many players had over 25 touches for the Dogs. They just wiped the floor with the Dons and they crashed back to earth. I know there's been a lot of good talk about Essendon over the last few weeks, and I don't think that really takes away from their future, but they got a smack right between the eyes in this game. The Dogs, I think, are a real contender this year. I think they're probably in the top 4 out of the best teams in the competition right now. And I think with the second half of their year, if they can just bank up some wins, finish in the top 4, I really think this game sent a message to the whole competition. So well done to the Dogs. Essendon crashed back to earth, truly. Moving to the stats in this one, though, on the multiple goal kickers for the Dogs, 4 goals to West, 3 goals to Karmas, 2 goals to Richards and Bontempelli. No multiple goal kickers for the Bombers, but high scorers were Nick Martin and Peter Wright with the 1 goal too. On the disposals, Bailey Dale, 49, had his own Sharon, 33 to Liberatore, 31 to Kennedy, 27 to Richards and Harms, and for Essendon, Roberts was 29, 27 to Redmond, 26 to Setterfield, and 25 to McGrath and Martin. And on the AFL fantasy front, Bailey Dale, 154, Kennedy 113, 109 to West, 108 to Liberatore, and 103 to Richards. And on Essendon's point of view, Xavier Dersman with a 106, Nick Martin 105, Setterfield with a 97, Redmond with a 94, and Wright with the 90. But getting to the votes in this one, 3 votes Bailey Dale, 2 votes Ed Richards, 1 vote to Riley West. I mean, I don't know why Essendon didn't tag Bailey Dale after three-quarter time. He had 39 disposals to the three-quarter time break, and they still just let him go. He had 37 kicks out of the 49 touches, 5 marks, which is pretty low in my opinion, but over 1,000 metres gained as well. Bailey Dale, I mean, it's not like he's came out of nowhere, this guy, either. He has dominated off halfback for a lot of his career, and Essendon refused to go near him. Now, I don't think it would have changed the result very much. Essendon were pretty much out of the game after the first 10 minutes of the contest, but what a performance from him. I think that next week, someone's going to go to Bailey Dale and stand on him all game, because 49 disposals is absolutely outstanding. It was a club record, as you would expect. Ed Richards, I mean, you could have raffled 2 and 1 votes in this game to many multiple Bulldogs players, but he has been one of the best players in the competition so far this year. Another 10+ scorer involvements for him today. Kicked 2 goals as well, 27 touches. I love the season he's putting together, so well done to him. And Riley West, I think I said at the start of the year he would have a breakout year, and he's had a little bit of a slow burn, but the last few weeks he's really burst onto the scene, and with 4 goals, 19 touches today, seems like he's finally coming into his own. So now we head to Adelaide Oval, Port against the Cats, and it was carnage on the injury front in the first half, and it was carnage on Port Adelaide's front in the second half. The Cats absolutely trounced the Power in the second half to run out winners by 76 points. The Cats 115, Port Adelaide 39. Now let's cover these injuries because there were a lot of them. First of all, Josh Sin received a knee to his hip and went down for assessment, but was later ruled out. So really unfortunate for him. He finally got some continuity into his football, but unfortunately now he could be missing a few weeks. Jason Horne-Francis didn't seem a lot in it in this one, but he was chasing after an opponent on the wing and pulled up short with an issue to his hamstring, and he was rolled out just before quarter time. Jack Bowes, pretty similar incident. He was chasing after the footy and his right hamstring went on him. He was subbed out just before quarter time as well. Patrick Dangerfield also did a hamstring in the early stages of the second term. He was rolled out just before the midway point of the quarter. And finally, Lockie Jones ran for the footy at halfback and he pulled up short with yet another hamstring injury. This was just before half time. So 4 hamstring injuries in this game. It was quite cold, but overall, really weird circumstances happening in this one. So let's get to the game itself. It was a wet weather game of football with the rain coming to Adelaide Oval just before the bounce. It struggled to acclimatise to the conditions with no score in the first 10 minutes of the contest. Now Geelong did get the first not too long after, but after they kicked their second, the Power started to dominate field position. But with their 6 scoring shots, they were only able to score 2 goals for, and with a late Cats goal, they were able to hold a 3-point lead heading into quarter time. Now Port Adelaide continued to dominate the territory battle for the second term, but failed to put it on the scoreboard until we saw Sam Powell-Pepper find the big sticks. But when the Cats had their chances in the latter parts of the second term, they took full advantage. They kicked 2 late goals to the Cats, leading by 9 points in the major break. And from that point on, it was a complete masterclass from Geelong as the Power fell off a cliff. The Cats kicked 12 goals to Port Adelaide's 2 in a second half demolition. And honestly, the Power walked off the Adelaide Oval in embarrassment as the Cats ran away winners by 76 points. Now, I know I'm glossing over a bit here, but this was an absolute trouncing in the second half. There's not really much to talk about. The Cats just absolutely dominated and Port Adelaide bent over and took it. They were absolutely smashed. It was one of the worst performances I've seen from Port Adelaide, and it's not even the first time we've seen it this year. Truly embarrassing, but the Cats did really well in this game to burst it open and to get a nice percentage booster. So overall, well done to the Cats. Port Adelaide, they've really got to start second guessing if they should keep on persisting with Ken Hinkley as the coach, because right now I think it's a huge confusion for the club and they're wasting a season here. But let's move to the statistics of this one. On the multiple goal kickers for Port Adelaide, the sole multiple goal kicker was SPP with the 2 goals too. For the Cats, Cameron 7 goals and Dempsey with the 2. On the disposals for Port Adelaide, Rosie 32, Wines 28, Burton 26, Sampal Pepper 23, and Burgoyne with the 22. And for the Cats, Bailey Smith 30, O'Connor 28, 27 to Myers, 24 to Dempsey, and 23 to Atkins. And on the AFL fantasy front, Ollie Wines top scorer for the Power, 127, Rosie 109, Vizentini 91, 86 to Palpapa, 82 to Burgoyne. And for the Cats, Smith with 123, O'Connor with a 110, Cameron 109, Blitzars 101, and Dempsey with a 97. But let's get to the votes in this game. 3 votes, Bailey Smith. 2 votes, Jeremy Cameron. 1 vote, Ollie Dempsey. Now, I know a lot of people would be looking at the scoreline and seeing that Jeremy Cameron kicked 7 goals. He should be getting 3 votes. He kicked 5 of them in the last quarter when the game was done. That's why he hasn't got the 3 here. He did get 2, though. I think 7 goals has to at least get you 2 votes. But Bailey Smith, I think, set this game up in the first 3 quarters, especially in that third quarter when they ran away with it. So that's why he's got 3. 2 votes to Jeremy Cameron, of course, 7 goals. You have to get that. And Ollie Dempsey is having a really underrated season so far. He's starting to get a few more bits of praise now that he's been working into his season. He could have had an absolute bag. He did kick 2 goals, 3. But he's on track for a goal a game this season. And playing as a wingman, that is outstanding. So great job from him. Deserved the vote today. And the other game on Saturday evening was the Giants up against Fremantle. Teams in very interesting form. The Giants coming off a very good performance against the Cats last week. The Dockers coming off a very disappointing few weeks. A little bit better against the Pies. But after a very close first half, the Dockers ran away with it and ran out winners by 34 points. 95 to the Dockers, 61 to the Giants. Now, there was one injury concern from this one, which was Toby McMullen. Came off with an adductor injury in the second term, and he was subbed out at half-time. But to the game itself, it was a very free-flowing game of football to start proceedings, with Fremantle's run being evident and both teams using the ball well. And with Fremantle being able to kick 3 goals to the Giants' only 2, they took the lead into the first break by a goal. Now, the Dockers looked very dangerous throughout the majority of the second term, but they missed so many opportunities. Despite 8 scoring shots, they only were able to record 2 goals, 6, and with the Giants getting 2 of their own, at half-time, they only held an 11-point lead. Now, the GWS were dominant in a lot of the statistics to start the third quarter. However, the one thing that was missing was their impact on the scoreboard, and it seemed their opponents had their kicking boots on. Freo kicked the first 2 goals of the second half to give themselves a game-high 21-point lead, and even though the Dockers missed some opportunities, they were able to keep the Giants goalless while they kicked 3 goals throughout the entire third term to cruise out to a 29-point lead at three-quarter time. And after the Dockers kicked the first 3 goals of the final term, Freo had the game won. GWS had a few late goals to flatter the scoreboard, but in the end, the Dockers ran out winners by 34 points. So the Dockers have been a little bit of a response team so far this year, so not surprised they came out with a response, but this is by far their best performance of the year. So well done to the Dockers. Hopefully they can use this as a momentum towards the rest of the season. They have the Power next week, then they have the Gold Coast before their bye, and the 3 games after their bye look pretty winnable, all at home. So Fremantle maybe can get their season up and going, but the Giants, they've been so up and down this year, such a roller coaster season so far. From the start of the year being premiership favourites to having a very poor month before last week's great performance against the Cats. I really don't know where they stand right now. They do have a lot of injuries, but really disappointing performance from them back at home. But moving to the statistics of this one, on the multiple goal kickers for the Giants, Brown and Jones both with the 2. For the Dockers, Bolton, Frederick with the 3, Amos with 2. On the disposals for GWS, Ash 29, Whitfield and Green with the 25, Callaghan 24 and Iden with the 18. And for Freo, Sarong with 36, Brayshaw 30, 24 to Bolton, 21 to Clark and Jackson. And finally on the AFL fantasy front, Lockie Ash with the 110, Callaghan 102, Whitfield 92, 85 to Iden and Briggs. And for Freo, Bolton 119, Sarong 108, Brayshaw 103, Jackson 98, and Frederick with the 86. But let's get to the votes in this game. 3 votes Shea Bolton, 2 votes Caleb Sarong, and the 1 vote to Frederick. Shea Bolton, best performance of his short Freo career to date, had 24 touches, 3 goals, 3, could have had an absolute bag. Been a little bit of a theme so far this round with players not taking full advantage on the scoreboard, but nonetheless, Shea Bolton really set this up in the first half with a brilliant performance from him, and he's really the spark the Dockers have missed over the past few years, so hopefully he can get into some career best form going forward. Caleb Sarong really worked into this game, but eventually ended up with 36 touches. When he plays well, the Dockers win, and he played very well today, so well done to him. And Michael Frederick, he seems to be working breaking into his season. Had a couple of 3-goal games this year. In the first half, he was absolutely brilliant. Did taper off a little bit in the second half, but I still think he deserved the 1 vote. So the first game on Saturday lived up to a very big contest. It was hyped up all over the week. The Pies against Adelaide. And in the end, it was Collingwood who held the Crows aside and keep their 8-year streak intact, winning by 10 points. Collingwood 78, the Crows 68. Now getting to the game, it was a really fast start to the contest with the ball pinging from end to end. It was also goal for goal for the majority of the opening term. However, with the Pies getting 2 late goals, it was Collingwood who held a 7-point lead at quarter time. Now Adelaide kicked the early goal to start the second quarter, but the pressure from Collingwood started to lift and that translated to the territory. But they were wayward in front of goal. After kicking 2 goals 4 compared to Adelaide's 3 goals straight, Collingwood only held a 5-point lead heading into the major break. And with the rain starting to pour around the ground, the game became much more of a slog. Both teams kept the game at an arm wrestle for the first half of the quarter. But the Crows struck first to take the lead, but it was only for a moment as this sparked the Pies. Collingwood kicked 3 late goals in the quarter to take a game-high 16-point lead heading into the 3-quarter time break. And when they kicked 2 of the first 3 goals in the first half of the final term, it looked like the Pies were going to cruise to victory. However, Adelaide did kick 2 goals in a row to set up for an intriguing finish to the contest, but in the end, Collingwood did enough to win by 10 points. So right now, I think Collingwood are the premiership favourites. They didn't even really have their best team in today. They lost Darcy Moore and Lachie Schultz, and they still look really, really good. It was a bit of a slog today, so they've shown that they can win in different ways, and it was a really good win from Collingwood, so well done to them. On the Crows, they just can't get over these barriers right now. They have to beat teams around them and the teams up the top if they're going to be competing in finals this year and doing something really special, but unfortunately, it just seems they're a little bit off the pace, and unfortunately for them, when the game became really contested, it just seemed like they were a little bit off. So unfortunately for Adelaide, in a wet weather game, they just couldn't live up to it. But moving to the statistics in this one, on the multiple goal kickers for Collingwood, the sole multiple goal kicker was Hoskin Elliott with the 2. On the Crows, Fogarty with 4, Saligo with 2. On the disposals for the Pies, Josh Dacos 29, Nick Dacos 28, Maynard 24, 22 to Pendlebury and Sidebottom. And for Adelaide, Dawson with 27, Long for Rory Laird, 26 to Rankin, 23 to Saligo, and 22 to Peatling. And on the AFL fantasy front, Maynard top for the Pies with 90, Nick Dacos 88, 83 to Cameron and Sidebottom, and 82 to Josh Dacos. And for the Crows, Dawson 138, Laird 95, Rankin 89, and 87 to Saligo and O'Brien. But let's get to the votes in this one. 3 votes, Jordan Dawson, 2 votes, Jeremy Howe, and the 1 vote to Darcy Fogarty. What a performance from Jordan Dawson today. He did absolutely everything he could to drag his team over the line. Kicked a clutch goal late to keep them in with a chance. Unfortunately, he couldn't get his team over the line, but he was a class above most players on the field today. 27 touches, 9 marks, 8 tackles, and a goal. Really good performance. Unfortunately, couldn't get his team over the line. Jeremy Howe with the 2 votes may surprise a few people looking at the stat sheet, but he was an absolute wall for the first 3 quarters. Stood up in the big moments, took 3 intercept marks in the opening term, and was a wall back there for Collingwood. And Darcy Fogarty with the 4 goals looked the most likely type for Adelaide as a tool. Phil Thorpe was kind of out of it, and Walker was definitely out of the game and subbed out in the 3rd quarter, so Darcy Fogarty really stood up. So on Friday night, we had the Mungarook game between the Swans and the Blues, and despite a very good first half from Carlton, they weren't able to break away, wasting their opportunities, and in the second half, it was all Sydney as they ran away in the final quarter to win by 16 points. 78 to the Swans, 62 to the Blues. And there were a couple of injury concerns from this one. First of all, Aaron Francis. He received some friendly fire when Brodie Grundy leaped up to take a mark. His quad connected with Francis's head, and he looked incredibly shaky when walking away from the incident. He was subbed out soon after a HIA at the halftime break. And on Jack Silvani, he was in the wards throughout the entire first half, but eventually the injury that ruled him out was an issue with his groin as he didn't return after the main break. But getting to the game itself, it was a wet weather game of footy, even though there was no rain during the contest itself. And the Blues took full advantage early, with Carlton dominating the territory battle throughout the majority of the opening term. However, the Blues weren't able to put a meaningful break on the Swans. They did creep out to a 13-point lead late in the quarter, but at the end of the opening term, Carlton only held a 1-goal lead. Now, it was a goal either way to start the second term, but the game wouldn't open up. Both teams' pressure was immense, and they struggled to score. And with the Swans and Blues getting 2 goals either side in the second quarter, Carlton just increased their quarter-time lead to 8 points to the major break. Now, the game continued to be an absolute slog through the third term. Despite no rain, the greasy conditions made for a contested, hard-fought quarter. And with neither team able to put much on the scoreboard, the Blues held a slender 5-point lead heading into the final term. And almost as soon as that final quarter began, the Swans hit the gas. gas. They took the lead for the first time in the game early in the final term and didn't look back. They kicked 5 goals in the final quarter, and honestly, it could have been more with 10 scoring shots throughout the final term, but they did enough in the end to run away winners by 16 points. So a great final quarter from the Sydney Swans was enough to break away. They did waste a few opportunities throughout the night, but in the end, it was the Chad Warner and Isaac Heaney show throughout the second half of the game. So a great job from Sydney. They do need to find some more contributors to come with them, but they got back on the winners list and keep their slender finals hopes alive. And Carlton, very disappointing after a very good first half where they didn't take their opportunities. In the second half, they went back to their one wood, which was bomb long in hope, and it just didn't work against Sydney's defence tonight. So incredibly disappointing for the Blues. Their finals hopes drop away once again. But moving to the statistics of this one, on the goal kickers, the multiple for Sydney was Isaac Heaney, Amati, and Warner all with 2. For the Blues, Curnow with 3, Mackay and Cripps with the 2. On the disposals for Sydney, Heaney with 38 disposals, career high for him. Warner with 30, McInerney 24, Lloyd 23, and Sheldrick with the 21. And for the Blues, Chera with 33, Hewitt 27, 26 to Cripps, 21 to Sard, and 20 to Elijah Hollins. And on the AFL fantasy front, Isaac Heaney, top scorer for the game with a 126, Chad Warner with a 116, Brodie Grundy 111, 90 to Lloyd, and 89 to McInerney. And for Carlton, Chera 119, Cripps 104, Hewitt 98, Mackay 88, and Pitternet with the 87. But now let's get to the votes in this game. 3 votes Isaac Heaney, 2 votes Chad Warner, and the 1 vote to Brodie Grundy. Now I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The first 2, of course, Isaac Heaney was the 3 votes, 38 disposals. Honestly, could have been one of the all-time games if he kicked straight, but 2 goals, 5, unfortunately for him, but overall was best on the ground. Chad Warner with the 2 goals, probably his best game of the year so far, so really well done to him, only pipped out by his mate in Heaney. And Brodie Grundy, the last 2 weeks, he has definitely improved off his very poor start to the season, and tonight, it kicked the fire starter for him in the final term. He looks a lot more fitter than he did at the start of the season, so I think Brodie Grundy deserves some roses after a very good performance tonight. So we started Indigenous round with the Gold Coast up against Hawthorn at the top end. The Suns have a very good record up there. It's going to be tough for the Hawks. They did fight their way back in the second half, but it wasn't enough as the Gold Coast ran out winners in the end by 8 points. 104 to the Suns, 96 to the Hawks. Now, despite the Hawks kicking an early goal in this game, it was all the Gold Coast for the majority of the first quarter. The Suns kicked 5 of the next 6 goals in the contest to break the game open. However, a late Hawthorn goal saw the Suns' lead reduced to just 20 points at the first break. And again, similar to the first quarter, the Hawks kicked the opening goal, but the Suns quickly got to work. Their work in the guts was clinical, and Hawthorn couldn't do much to stop it, with the Gold Coast leading by over 5 goals midway through the term. But a late flurry of goals for the Hawks saw the margin reduced to 14 points at half-time. And heading into the second half, the script seemed to flip. Sam Mitchell flicked the magnets around and the game started to swing in Hawthorn's favour. Despite conceding the opening goal of the second half, the Hawks kicked 5 of the next 6 goals to take the lead heading into three-quarter time for the first time since the opening minutes of the contest. From 34 points down midway through the second term to take a 3-point lead heading into the final change was no easy feat. However, whether the Suns kicked the first 3 goals of the final term, it seemed that the fight back from the Hawks in the third term would be in vain. But they made one last push. Hawthorn kicked 2 in response to be within 2 points in the latter part to the final term. However, the Suns did kick away with the 2 of the last 3 goals to run out winners by 8 points. So it was always going to be tough for Hawthorn to win up there. Both teams coming off a 5-day break. And to be honest, the Gold Coast just played the conditions better for the majority of the night. Hawthorn did fight back in that third quarter, but in the end, the Gold Coast just way too good up in Darwin. They may want to play some more home games there because they are so good up there. I think it's 8 from 8 now, and they are doing really well, the Suns, jumping into the top 2 after this game. But moving to the stats, of course, the multiple goal kickers first of all. For the Suns, Long with 4, King, Ainsworth, and Miller all with 2, and for Hawthorn, Hardwick, Chol, and Watson all with 3, Ginnivan with 2. On the disposals for the Suns, Noble 36, Anderson 35, Rao 29, Closey 23, and Hewlin with the 22. And for Hawthorn, Amon 30, Newcomb 29, 23 to Ward, 22 to Ginnivan, and 20 to Warple. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front, Noble and Anderson with the 116, Rao 99, Miller at 92, Witts with the 89. And for the Hawks, Newcomb 123, Ginnivan 94, Amon 92, Moore 87, and Morrison with the 85. But getting to the votes in this one, 3 votes John Noble, 2 votes John Newcomb, and the 1 vote to Ben Long. John Noble is arguably the best recruit recruit of the year. I know people would say Bailey Smith, but John Noble's having an insane year for the Suns off of halfback, and he gained a kilometre in metres gained today. Over 1,000 metres gained. Absolutely insane from a halfback. I know the boundary riders votes aren't purely on just disposals, but 36 tonight and those metres gained were immense for the Gold Coast. Pushed them forward every chance he got, so well done to him. John Newcombe was the best on the ground for the Hawks. Was hard last week after getting tagged by Clayton Oliver, so he really responded from 29 touches and a goal. 8 tackles as well. John Newcombe led from the front today, and it was really hard to pick the one vote. I wanted to go with Noah Anderson. If it was ended at half time, he would have got all 3, Noah Anderson, but he got shut down by Finn McGuinness, and I really felt throughout the whole game, Ben Long kept that real consistency, and he was the most dangerous forward up there, so that's why I've given him the one vote. But guys, thanks for watching this episode of The Review. I hope you did enjoy it. And if you want to listen to the full episode, then make sure to go check us out on Spotify, as you can listen to the full episode there the morning after the round finishes. But that is all from me, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy it. But for now, we'll catch you all in the next one.